Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to our webinar. My name is Jackie. I'm the Marketing and Communications Manager at Nordic Innovation House, Singapore. So today, thanks for joining us for the webinar on business opportunities in circular economy and energy efficiency in Singapore. This webinar is organized by Nordic Innovation House, Singapore, and also the Nordic Trade Promotion Offices and Nordic Embassies in Singapore, and also supported by Nordic Innovation and Nopef, the Nordic Project Fund. So for today's agenda, we will have a short welcome remarks and also an introduction to Singapore Green Plan and Zero Waste Master Plan by National Environment Agency. We will also cover circular economy and energy efficiency market insights in these three subsectors: food and packaging waste management, waste value optimization, and energy efficiency, followed by how you can learn more about Nordic Delegations to Singapore 2023 and how to apply to join us in Singapore, and also how to apply for additional funding. And also we will have a Q&A session at the end of the presentations. So before moving forward, for attendees, please remain muted. And then at the end of this webinar, we will be sharing the recording and the slides as well. So now I would like to welcome Richard, our chairman of Nordic Innovation House Singapore, and also the country manager at Business Sweden Singapore for a short welcome remarks. Richard, please.
Thank you, Jackie, and good morning or good afternoon, depending on where in the world that you are calling in from. My name is Richard Levin. I'm, as Jackie mentioned, the chairman of Nordic Innovation House here in Singapore. I'm also the head of Business Sweden here in Singapore. Nordic Innovation House is a collaboration between the trade promoting agencies in the Nordics. That would be Business Sweden, Innovation Norway, Business Finland, Embassy of Finland, Embassy of Denmark, Business Iceland. As such, this Nordic Innovation House are present around the globe. We are here in Singapore. We are also in the US, Hong Kong, and Tokyo. Here in Singapore, we stand on three pillars on what we are trying to achieve and do. We drive innovations from the Nordics to the global markets, and here specific to Singapore. We act as the link between Nordic and Singaporean ecosystem, governmental players, SMEs, investors, and so on, to enable collaboration in focus areas. We are also the connector between Nordic tech startups and startups in general and growth companies into Singapore, setting up delegation, market visit, matchmaking sessions, and so on. We also have a very active LinkedIn feed that you, Jackie, is operating. So if you are not present following Nordic Innovation House in Singapore, I strongly encourage you to do so. And I assume, Jackie, that we can send a link for that afterwards, right? If we go to the next slide. As such, we have 5 focus areas: sustainable ocean economy, green energy, circular business model, smart connectivity and mobility, and life science and health tech. For today's session, we will have focus on number 2 and 3, green energy and circular business models, to discuss more of which we will hear a lot in just a few minutes. We go to the next session. Next slide. So why do we think Singapore is a place to pay attention to in these days? I will not go through all of them, all of these factors, but there are a few I think are extra important to take notice of. The first one is the obvious, right? Singapore has a unique geographic position. We are one of the busiest ports in the world. We have 5 hours to most parts of Asia, including Australia. We are very much becoming an even more economic hotspot We see many Swedish and Norwegian and global companies moving operations to Singapore, more and more so every day, basically. That also goes for FDI flow, where we see a lot coming in. I think we are the highest in Asia for the moment in terms of FDI flow. We have a very robust business environment here in Singapore in terms of law and so on. World-class workforce. Most Singaporeans are highly educated, speak good English, and are used to work in an international environment. And least but not least, very long time political stability, which is in many senses good, but especially good, of course, in a business perspective. You know what to expect and so on. This is just a few things on a macro level why Singapore is important to pay attention to, and soon we will hear more of why Singapore is important to pay attention to from a circular and energy perspective. That was all from me. I'm really looking forward to the upcoming seminar here, and I hope you also do that and see you around. Thank you, Jackie.
Okay, thank you so much, Rikard, for the welcome remarks. So next, we will actually have the National Environment Agency, NEA, to do an introduction for Singapore Green Plan and Zero Waste Master Plan. National Environment Agency, in short NEA, is the leading public organization responsible for ensuring a clean and sustainable environment for Singapore. So now today we have Lydia Tan, Senior Assistant Director from the Cluster Development, Environmental Technology and Industry Development Division, to share about Singapore Green Plan. And we also have followed by Sing Yi, Senior Engineer, Department of Sustainability Strategy under the Sustainability Division, to share more about Zero Waste Master Plan in Singapore. So Lydia, please.
Hi, thank you. Good morning to all. I'm Lydia from the National Environment Agency, giving you an overview on Singapore Green Plan. I'll first share on why the need for SG Green Plan, followed by what the SG Green Plan entails. Sustainability has always been a part of Singapore's DNA. Singapore has always pursued sustainable development by balancing economic growth with protecting our environment. For example, as early as 1967, we had a vision of Garden City and took active steps to make this a reality, such as through tree planting along all our roads to give a sense of pervasive greenery. In the 1980s, the government undertook the monumental task of cleaning up our rivers, including the Singapore River. More recently, we have converted our water infrastructure into welcoming community spaces that people can enjoy. One example, Bishan Ang Mo Kio Park. It is used to be a concrete canal which was naturalized and is now a popular recreational space. Our sustainability plans continue to evolve over the years to address new challenges and ensure Singapore remains a green and livable home. The most imminent challenge for us today is that of climate change. The IPCC indicated that globally, we need to keep warming to within 2 degrees to avoid the worst impacts of climate change, with the Paris Agreement aiming to pursue efforts towards 1.5 degrees. However, current climate policies and pledges are not enough to get us within 2 degrees. So it is clear that there is an urgent need for all countries to step up efforts. As a resource-scarce and low-lying island state, the impact of climate change on Singapore is disproportionately larger than for other countries. Not only are we an island nation that is susceptible to sea level rise, but also we are highly dependent on trade and imports for survival. We will be impacted if there are disruptions in supply chains in other parts of the world due to climate change. Example, climate change impacts on regions' agricultural output can in turn affect the prices and supply of imported food in Singapore. We recognize our limitations and challenges. Being both a city and a nation, we need to provide for defense, industries, homes, critical infrastructure, all within our slightly over 700 square kilometers of land. We lack national resources, land area, and climatic conditions for large-scale deployment of renewable energy sources. This poses a challenge for us.
Hi, Lydia, the slides are not changing actually.
Sorry. Actually, I'm already at, can you see that?
Yes, now we can see, sorry.
Okay. This poses a challenge for us to achieve net zero emission in the same way that bigger countries can pledge to do. Yet climate change is a global problem that needs international collaboration to mitigate. As a responsible global citizens, we are committed to climate actions and sustainable development, which is in sync with international efforts and the global sustainability agenda. Launched in February 2021, the SG Plan 2030 seeks to galvanize a whole-of-nation movement and advance Singapore's national agenda on sustainable development. Spearheaded by 5 ministries, the Ministries of Sustainability and the Environment, Trade and Industry, Transport, National Development and Education, and supported by the whole of government, a whole of nation, the Green Plan charts ambitious and concrete targets for the rest of this decade. It also reinforces our commitment to do our part in tackling climate change and to transit towards a low carbon future. In October 2022, we raised our ambition to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. This takes into consideration advancements in green technologies. Low carbon solutions like hydrogen and carbon capture, usage and storage are starting to look more plausible. There's also new opportunity for carbon credits to be traded internationally. We will adopt the 3 Rs of carbon to get towards net zero. Reduce the footprint of individuals and businesses, replace fossil fuels with green energy, remove carbon dioxide for emissions that are difficult to abate. Carbon tax is a key lever to achieve our net zero ambition, as it allows businesses and individuals to internalize the cost of carbon and take actions to moderate their emissions. The carbon tax will be $25 per ton in 2024 and 2025, hitting $45 per ton in 2026 and 2027, with a view to reach $50 to $80 per ton by 2030. The revenue generated will fund support measures for businesses and households to transit to a low carbon future. The key program of the Green Plan are organized according to the following 5 pillars shown on screen, and they are enabled by green government, green businesses, and green citizenry. Under these pillars are ambitious and concrete targets that Singapore is striving towards. Firstly, under Energy Reset, it comprises efforts to use cleaner energy and increase our energy efficiency to lower our carbon footprint. Key targets include increased solar energy deployment to at least 2 gigawatt peak by 2030, diversify electricity supply with low carbon electricity imports. In total, we plan to import up to 4 gigawatt of low carbon electricity by 2035. Raise sustainability standards of buildings, example, 80% of our new buildings to be super low energy buildings from 2030. Making our public housing towns more sustainable. All new car and taxi registrations to be a cleaner energy models from 2030, and public housing towns to be EV ready by 2035. Under sustainable living, we encourage water conservation for households and industries and implement a national strategy to address e-waste, packaging waste, and food waste. One of the new initiatives is a minimum charge of 5 cents per disposable carrier bag at larger supermarkets starting mid-2023 to encourage more sustainable consumption. We will green our commutes by expanding rail network and cycling network and to encourage public transport. We will purchase only cleaner energy public buses with bus fleet to fully run on cleaner energy by 2040. We are also strengthening green efforts in schools by building sustainability conscious mindsets and habits among our youth through the school curriculum and culture. We will also reduce the carbon emission of our schools, and the target is to have at least 20% of schools to be carbon neutral by 2030. Under the City in Nature pillar, we strive to infuse greenery into our living environment and building up our carbon sink by extending nature throughout our island. The initiatives for this pillar include expanding our nature park network, intensifying nature in our gardens and parks, and integrating nature into our urban environment. Under the green economy pillar, we seek to ensure that our future economy remains competitive in the midst of carbon and resource constraints and to rally businesses towards sustainable economic growth. First, we will gain our industry through lowering the carbon footprint of our industrial activities. One of the key initiatives is transforming Jurong Island into a sustainable energy and chemical park and improving industry's energy efficiency. Grants are available for companies to tap on to adopt more energy efficient solutions. To help local enterprises adopt sustainability practices, we set up a $180 million enterprise sustainability program to help enhance their resource efficiency and capture new business opportunities in sustainability. Second, we see sustainability as a new engine of jobs and growth. We aim to develop Singapore as a carbon trading and services hub as we see growing interest in carbon markets development. Singapore is in a good position to serve as carbon trading and services hub in Asia, considering our robust legislative framework and our position as an established hub for trade, financials, and professional services. We're also home to research institutes and carbon marketplaces such as Center for Nature-Based Climate Solutions, Air Carbon, and Climate Impact X. Beyond carbon services, we also ramp up our R&D efforts for innovative sustainability solutions, such as clean and renewable energy, circular economy, and low carbon solutions. These efforts will create new jobs, transform our industries, and harness sustainability as a competitive advantage for Singapore. Resilient Future comprises plans to adopt and protect ourselves against the effects of climate change. For coastal and flood protection, we are conducting modeling studies to analyze the effects of rising sea levels and develop coastal protection measures. To keep Singapore cool, we will make use of sensors and modeling to simulate the urban heat island effect and test the effectiveness of mitigation measures. To boost food security and meet 30% of our nutritional needs through locally produced food by 2030, we will set aside more space and infrastructure for agriculture and aquaculture, incentivize the agri-food industry to adopt productive, climate-resilient, and resource-efficient farming technologies, and develop a local pipeline of skilled workers. GreenGov.sg is a sustainability movement launched by the public sector to support the Green Plan and take a lead on sustainable development. The three components under this initiative are Excel, Enable, and Excite. Under Excel, the public sector has set targets for carbon emissions, energy, water, and waste. For instance, we aim to peak the public sector's emission around 2025, which is 5 years ahead of the national targets. These targets will cover the whole spectrum of government-owned infrastructure and operations. Under Enable, we will embed sustainability into the public sector's core business areas, such as procurement and citizen engagement. These may be of your interest if you are keen to bid on our government tenders. For instance, government agencies will adopt green procurement by purchasing products that meet high efficiency or sustainability standards. We will also factor in company sustainability-related policies and practices when evaluating government tenders. Under Excite, we will work towards building a sustainability culture within the public sector and mobilize public officers to adopt sustainability as a way of life. The second key enabler is green citizenry. It is important that every individual, household, organization, and business play their part. Hence, the government will continue to engage our partners in the 3P sectors to tap on their energy, experiences, and ideas to co-create and co-deliver solutions. You may refer to the website on the link for more info on SG Green Plan. We also welcome you to join us at the Clean Environment Summit Singapore, CESG in short, in June 2024, organized by the National Environment Agency, to expound further the various strategies and initiatives that I have just shared. You may scan the QR code shown on screen for more details. We look forward to see you in person at CESG 2024. Thank you.
Okay, next we will have Xingyi to share more about Zero Waste Master Plan in Singapore. Xingyi, please.
Thanks, Jacqueline. I'm Xingyi from National Environment Agency from the Sustainability Division. So I look more at developing initiatives to address packaging waste, which I'll talk a bit later in one of the slides. So today my presentation will touch on the overall solid waste management in Singapore, the Zero Waste Master Plan, as well as some of the initiatives that we have implemented or we are implementing to close some of the resource loops. So our solid waste management, Singapore faces several key challenges which drives the need for us to move towards circular economy as well as to build resilience. First, we are a low-lying island state. So climate change threatens our way of life and our existence. Second, our economy is mostly, currently is mostly based on the linear model. So the unsustainable production consumption puts pressure on our increasingly carbon constrained world. Third is land constraints. Singapore is a small island state we are about 700 plus kilometers square in size, and we only have one landfill, the Semakau landfill, which you see in the photo on the right. This is located in the southern part of Singapore, in an offshore island. So the Singapore land is a real constraint, and there is limited land to build new waste management infrastructure. You can see from the chart on the left, over the past 40 years, the total amount of waste disposed in Singapore has increased significantly, 7-fold. So in last year, about 8,500 tons of waste is being disposed of per day. Based on this current disposal rates, our landfill will run out of space by 2035. So there's a real need to move towards circular economy and to divert waste away from our landfill. This slide shows some of the waste statistics in Singapore. In 2021, about 19,000 tons of waste is being generated per day. These are collected from domestic and trade premises, as well as industrial and commercial premises. About 55% of this waste is being recycled, while the rest of the incinerable waste is sent to the waste incineration plants. After incineration, some of the metals are being recovered, while the rest of the ash is being sent to the landfill together with the non-incinerable waste. So we launched the Zero Waste Master Plan in 2019. It maps out Singapore's key strategies towards zero waste nation, with key roles identified for the government, businesses, as well as the community. There's a need to shift away from linear to a circular economy with more sustainable production, sustainable consumption, as well as sustainable waste to resource management. This entails closing as many resource loops as possible to minimize the wastage of resources in our production as well as consumption. Our vision is to create a sustainable, resource efficient, and climate resilient Singapore. This relies on building climate resilience to address the threats of climate change, especially rising sea levels. Resource resilience to ensure a safe and secure supply of critical resources, as well as economic resilience to ensure that our economy remains competitive by overcoming carbon and resource constraints. Under the SG Green Plan and our Zero Waste Master Plan, we have set ourselves ambitious targets to reduce the amount of waste sent to landfill per capita per day by 20% by 2026 and 30% by 2030. We also have a national target of 70% recycling rate by 2030. So to achieve these targets, we have identified 3 priority waste streams to close the resource loop. And these are packaging waste, food waste, as well as e-waste. So packaging waste and food waste, generally they have a high generation rate, but relatively low recycling rate. Whereas for e-waste, although the generation rate is not as high, the recycling rate is low. And if it is not treated properly, the e-waste will be harmful to our environment. So we introduced the Resource Sustainability Act, RSA, in 2019, which gives the legislative effect to implement regulatory measures to address these 3 priority waste streams. So first on the packaging waste loop, packaging waste constitutes about 1/3 of our domestic waste disposal. So there's a critical need to address packaging waste for our sustainable waste to resource management as well as climate mitigation. To close the packaging waste loop, we have mandated the reporting of packaging data as well as the plans to reduce, reuse, and recycle packaging. This came into effect in 2021, and it aims to raise companies' awareness of how much packaging they generated, as well as to encourage companies to reduce the amount of packaging used. Last week, we passed legislation to introduce the disposable carrier bag charge at larger supermarket operators. In the same legislation, we also introduced the beverage container return scheme. And this will be, this is a deposit refund scheme. I think most of you are familiar with. This will be implemented from 1st April 2025. And this will be the first phase of our extended producer responsibility framework for packaging waste management. Under this scheme, we will target plastic containers as well as metal cans. There will be a deposit of 10 cents, and the scheme operator is expected to achieve an 80% return rate for the beverage containers covered under the scheme. Beyond this, we are looking at the next phase of the EPR approach for packaging waste, beyond just beverage containers, but also to look at what else we can do to cover our other types of packaging, like your shampoo bottles, etc. Apart from these regulatory measures, we also have the Packaging Partnership Program, which is an industry-led initiative to help build capability within companies, to help them move towards sustainable packaging waste management, and to help companies to fulfill the regulatory obligations. This slide shows how the beverage container return scheme work, which I think I will skip because I think most of you should be familiar with this. So the disposable carrier bag charge aims to encourage a shift towards more sustainable and environmentally friendly habits. This will be implemented from 3rd July this year, and it will be implemented at large supermarkets with a turnover of more than 100 million annually. The supermarket operators will have to charge a minimum of 5 cents per bag, and this is regardless of the material type. So we're not just covering plastic bags, but also other types like paper as well. The operators will be required to publish the information on the number of bags issued, the amount of proceeds received, as well as how the proceeds are being used. Moving on to food waste. From 2021, developers of the new large commercial and industrial premises, they will have to set aside space for on-site food waste treatment systems. From 2024 to 2025, all such large premises will have to segregate food waste for treatment and to report the amount of food waste treated. We are also exploring co-digestion to convert food waste to useful products. So we have conducted trials which show that the co-digestion of food waste with used water sludge can triple the biogas yield, which the biogas can then be used to produce electricity. So this will be implemented at the upcoming Tuas Nexus, which is a co-located facility with an waste management facility together with a water reclamation plant. For e-waste, we have implemented the EPR approach for e-waste in July 2021, and this covers 5 product categories, as you can see at the bottom: large appliances, ICT equipment, batteries, solar PVs, as well as lamps. So under the framework, the producers will have to join a producer responsibility scheme, where the scheme operator will help to collect and recycle the e-waste on behalf of the producers. The scheme operator appointed is ALBA, and apart from producers, retailers would also have to provide one-to-one take back of the products, and large retail stores will have to provide in-store collection points. Apart from the 3 priority waste streams, we are also looking at other waste loops. One is to look at closing the resource loop through the creation of new sand. So at a waste to energy research facility, municipal solid waste is gasified at high temperature into a slag. And this slag will be used to partially replace conventional fine aggregates in concrete, which is then used for road construction. We are also looking at trialing the use of treated incineration bottom ash, which can also be used for building materials in non-structural applications. So the use of new sand will help us to extend the lifespan of our landfill, and the treated bottom ash can be transformed into building blocks of life. So this will help us to divert the ash away from the landfill and to extend the lifespan of it. We are also looking at transforming our waste infrastructure. One example is the Trust Nexus, which is a co-location of the integrated waste management facility with our Trust water reclamation plant. This will harness synergies at the wastewater energy nexus. So for example, the steam produced at the waste management facility, it will be supplied to the water reclamation plant for its thermal hydrolysis process, which can be used to treat water sludge and greasy waste. We are also developing a multi-story recycling facility, which will co-locate recyclers of different waste streams to help promote synergies between them. We are also engaging the community because the community plays an important role as we move towards a zero waste nation. To help households identify recyclables more easily, we refresh the recycling bin labels on all the blue recycling bins with photos of recyclables and non-recyclables. We also embark on the Recycle Right campaign, which is a movement to raise awareness on what can and cannot be recycled. And as part of this movement, we are distributing a free recycling box. This is the blue box that you see on the top right corner. So this is being distributed to every household in Singapore, and it aims to encourage all households to set up a recycling corner in their homes and to start the habit of recycling at home. We have also an annual Say Yes to Waste Less campaign, which is to encourage the community to adopt a sustainable lifestyle by reducing disposables and waste and food waste. So with that, I hope you have a better understanding of our zero waste management, of our solid waste management in Singapore. And I pass the time back to Jacqueline.
Thank you so much. Let me change back to my slides. Give me a second. Okay, I hope everyone can see my slides now. So thank you very much, Lydia and Xingyi, for the very insightful message and initiatives and developments that Singapore is actually targeting and the goals that we hope to achieve under the Singapore Green Plan and Zero Waste Master Plan. So thank you so much, Lydia and Xingyi again for NEA. So next, we come to the next segment of our webinar, which is the Circular Economy and Energy Efficiency Market Insights. So today we'll be covering actually three subsectors. The first one, food and packaging waste management. The second one, waste value optimization. And the third one will be energy efficiency. So first, I will hand over the time to Susanna. She's from Innovation Norway. She will cover food and packaging waste management market insights. Susanna, please.
Thank you, Jackie. Good morning to all our Nordic partners. My name is Susanna, and I'm a market advisor at Nordic Innovation Norway in Singapore. I will touch on food waste first. So food waste is one of the biggest waste streams in Singapore. In 2019 alone, Singapore wasted 744 million kilos of food, as heavy as 50,000 double-decker buses. Food waste accounts for about 12% of the total waste generated in Singapore. So there is a need to minimize food wastage, recycle or treat unavoidable food waste. Increasing food waste also puts pressure on the nation's resources and the need to build more waste disposal facilities, such as waste to energy plants and landfills for incineration as ash. This is not sustainable for the land scarce city-state. When food is wasted, more food has to be sourced to meet the food demand. So are all of the resources used to grow and deliver the food to our tables, as well as to dispose of it. This increases our carbon footprint, contributing to global warming and climate change. Next slide, please, Jackie. NEA focus is to prevent and reduce food wastage at source, redistributing of unsold and excess food, recycling and treating food waste, and to recover energy. Singapore is also working towards a 30 by 30 goal, which aims to build the local agri-food industry capacity and capability so that it can produce 30% of the country's nutritional needs sustainably by 2030. On packaging waste, Singapore is a resource-poor nation and a big consumer of packaged goods. Most consumer products come with a great deal of packaging. In 2021, 532,000 tons or $1.8 billion worth of domestic packaging waste was thrown out in Singapore. In a recent study by UN University's Institute for Water, Environment and Health, it is also found that people in Singapore consume and spend the most on bottled water per capita, far more than any other country. Next slide, please. So what are the market opportunities here in Singapore on food waste and packaging waste? So the primary opportunities to reduce and reuse would include product out of specification, insufficient demand from the market, loss of production, protection against pest, etc. Next slide, Jackie. Loss during transportation, storage, sorting, packing, conditioning, better design packaging, optimized use of controlled environment, reduce transportation lead time, maintenance of equipment, cancellation of food, cancellation of order, insufficient shelf life, unwanted goods, optimized purchase of food based on demand. To rely on an ecosystem of organization that can reduce products. The mishandling of goods by staff or consumers is very important. Training for staff on food handling and packaging. Many a time we see, the food in the supermarket that are rotting or that have actually, been very mishandled. So food waste from consumer would means including the awareness campaigns, incentives, and things like that. And also, the to be coming soon implementation of the 5 cents charge on disposable carriers. Some examples of secondary opportunities, that is to recycle and upcycle, is feeds for animals, composting, fertilizing, anaerobic digestion. Next slide, Jackie. Our partner IPI Singapore has helped to identify some specific technology needs that I will share with you now. So agri-food waste valorization, including side streams that can be converted into higher value products. Agricultural biostimulants, alternative proteins, plant and cell-based, digitalization and automation in farm operations and food manufacturing. Extraction of valuable ingredients, example, proteins from the black soldier fly larvae suitable for use in other industry, example, aquaculture, animal feed, and manufacturing. Farm waste management and valorization, farming inputs technology, example, feed, fertilizer, etc. Functional ingredients, particularly technology to extract from food byproducts. Integrated pest management technologies, macro and micronutrients in fertilizer, microbes as biofertilizers, microbiome, particularly on the elderly. specialty feed and additives, self-healing materials for heat reflection coating on transparent substrate, water and wastewater treatment, particularly resource recovery from wastewater and solid waste. So technology needs for packaging, next slide, Jackie, would include coatings for paper and flexible packaging to improve barrier properties. Cost-effective, sustainable, hard and flexible packaging materials, including bioplastics, natural and biodegradable materials, recyclable packaging materials, example, mono materials that have no impact on national waste streams, smart and functional solutions for printed packaging, that is specialty inks, digital technologies such as for anti-counterfeit, gamification, upcycling of packaging into new products or packaging. So working with our stakeholders, next slide, Jackie. The National Environment Agency is the regulatory body in charge of the enforcement of the law for waste management in Singapore. Leveraging the technologies and expertise of Nordic companies across the value chain can help accelerate a circular economy for food and packaging waste. We are in regular dialogue with NEA and will continue to engage with local stakeholders in the value chain to identify problem statements and to source for relevant Nordic solutions to turn food and packaging waste into new products instead of ending up in the environment, incineration, or landfill. Thank you.
Thank you, Susanna. Next, I would like to invite Mark Perry from the Embassy of Denmark in Singapore to share more about insights on waste value optimization. Mark, please.
Yeah, hello everyone, welcome. Thanks for listening in. Is my sound okay, Jackie?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, I hope to see many of you in the delegation in June, but we'll get back to that a bit later in this presentation. So what we've been looking at the Danish Embassy in Singapore is what are the waste streams available in Singapore, and what are the business opportunities related to optimizing the value of these waste streams. And the way we've looked at it is, well, first of all, as I mentioned, what are the waste streams available? How much is available in each waste stream? What is the value? Where do we have Nordic competencies? And where does Singapore's government have a strategic interest to promote recycling? And that has led us to some insights that I would like to share on this executive summary slide. So first of all, we tried to get an estimate of what is the total market potential for all these waste streams in Singapore. And there's a slide later on the breakdown, but we estimate up to 4 billion Singapore dollars in material value alone. Of course, the main driver is what we heard earlier from NEA. The nation's only landfill is running out of space. It will run out of space in 2035 if nothing is done. And that's really the main driver for this zero waste nation master plan. Another thing that is happening in Singapore is that the government wants to transform industries across sectors to Industry 4.0. And that means more automated processes, improved efficiency, and improved working environments. And this is very much the case in the waste management industry as well. So most of the solutions that are needed fall into these categories. Now, there's a lot of different waste streams in Singapore. The ones we find have the biggest potential based on interviews with key players in the sector are metals, e-waste, plastics, wood, food, textile, leather, and construction and demolition waste. So when you come to Singapore, and I say when because I really hope we see all of you in Singapore, these are some of the waste streams that we'll be looking into and diving further into and meeting with potential or stakeholders, key stakeholders dealing with these waste streams. We also looked at is there enough raw materials in Singapore to actually build businesses optimizing the value? And the answer is yes, there is enough raw material. But what's really needed is an infrastructure that can separate and clean these different waste materials. So therefore, we also think that most of the business opportunities will be within sorting, cleaning, and processing of waste into suitable raw materials. So that was the executive summary. I believe all of this will be made available to you afterwards. So this is just a brief introduction. Maybe next slide, Jackie. Yeah, so this slide has already been spoken about in detail earlier by NEA. I just wanted to drive the message through that when you're in the circular economy business, something that really drives business opportunities is long-term planning, and it's a whole of government approach. And that's exactly what we see in Singapore with the Green Plan and also the political stability. It really allows the nation to plan far ahead, 20, 30, 40 years ahead of time. Next slide, please. Oh, yeah. So one thing that we also found is that the ecosystem, the waste management ecosystem, is actually dominated by private players. So you have public waste collectors, but all the recovery of materials and all the recycling are done by private players. Interestingly, the recovery facilities, so where you bring waste in and you clean it and package it, are separated from the recycling plants. So we don't see a lot of examples of material recovery and recycling being in the same facility. It's typically owned by different players. And yes, that was at least surprising to me, because coming from Denmark, a lot of the waste management ecosystem is actually publicly owned and driven. So something to keep in mind. Next slide. This is an overview of some of the key stakeholders, and they've also been mentioned before, and we'll come back to these later, because these are the stakeholders that you'll be able to meet during the delegation. So we have NEA as the regulator, then we have public waste collectors, companies like Semcorp, 800 Super, Alba, and then we also have general waste collectors. There's actually more than 300 entities in Singapore that have a GWC license, quite a lot. Then we have the material recovery facilities and the recycling facilities. There's also some examples of big players here. Singapore has 4 incineration plants, they're also mentioned. And then there's a wide range of different industry associations and international organizations that sort of bring together the ecosystem. And these are also some of the stakeholders that you can meet in the delegation. I think I only have 2 slides left. So next one, Jackie. Yeah, so interestingly, it does seem like the amount of solid waste generated in Singapore has plateaued. So it's increased year on year ever since I guess the waste amounts were started to be measured. But now lately it seems to have plateaued at around 6 to 8 million tons annually. Probably due to yeah, that's actually difficult to say what the reason is, but I think because the population is not growing so much anymore, and probably better habits, but we can talk more about that later. The final slide. Yeah, so this is our breakdown that led to our estimation of the market potential. So basically, we took all the waste streams, and NEA have very good statistics on the amount generated for each waste stream. And then we estimated what is the value per ton of each waste stream, and then it's basically multiplying and summing up. And then we get a range of around 0.6 to 4 billion Singapore dollars. So plenty of ways to build a business out of here in Singapore. I think that's it for me. Thanks, Jackie.
Thank you, Mark. Next, we have Clarence and Nicole from Business Sweden that has put together market insights on energy efficiency. So Clarence, please.
Yep. Thank you, Jackie. Good morning and good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. So now I'll cover the energy efficiency landscape that we have studied in this webinar itself. So maybe Jackie, next slide. Yeah, so firstly, how do we actually define energy efficiency? Well, basically, it's about using the lesser energy to perform essentially what is the same task and to produce the same result. And in Singapore, energy efficiency is largely driven by the government. So ultimately, Singapore's energy policy in a nutshell is basically to reduce emissions. And how this is so is because within Singapore itself, when you talk about household consumption, when you talk about industrial production, everything is intricately linked to electricity and energy consumption. And this is also intricately linked itself to carbon emissions. So for Singapore, as Singapore seeks to transform the way energy is used and seeks to basically mitigate some of the emissions so that we can transition to a net zero economy, energy efficiency has come to the forefront as well. And if we see the breakdown of the electricity generation fuel mix in Singapore, we can currently see that Singapore is heavily dependent on natural gas, where we have about 95% of the fuel mix being natural gas. And in terms of this, we can also see that so Singapore has 4 energy supply switches. The first one is solar energy. And if we look at the chart on the left, solar energy currently takes less than 2.9% of the total electricity generation fuel mix. However, as Singapore aims to transition to a more energy efficient society, solar energy is very important as one of the cleaner and renewable energy sources. This is because within Singapore itself, due to our resource constraint, be it in terms of natural resources, and most importantly, in terms of land constraint, solar energy being able to be deployed even in innovative locations such as on water bodies is seen as key as an energy switch in Singapore. Next, the next energy supply switch is natural gas, which we can see that we have a huge reliance on, 95% in fact. And most of the natural gas is actually imported from Malaysia and Indonesia itself. And in the next few decades, Singapore will still be heavily dependent on natural gas, but the Singapore government is also looking into diversifying into other sources of energy in order to create energy resilience in Singapore. So how this is done, besides solar energy as well, is through regional power grids. So Singapore has agreements with some of the other countries in the region in order to supply energy through their regional power grids into Singapore. So this helps to overcome the land constraints that we've mentioned previously, and also allows Singapore to access cleaner energy sources that is beyond our borders. And the last energy supply switch that we are looking at is low carbon alternatives, which is ultimately aimed at reducing Singapore's carbon footprint. So this helps to reduce the carbon emissions in Singapore, thereby allowing more energy efficiency in Singapore. And in terms of the energy efficiency strategy, it's largely administered by the Singapore government. And through this, we have observed four strategies by which how they go about promoting energy efficiency. So the first is through the adoption, the promoting of the adoption of energy efficient measures and technologies. And this can come from both legislative sides, such as the Energy Conservation Act, or through some of the incentives that the government has for the society in Singapore. Secondly, it's in terms of building up our capability within Singapore to sustain and drive energy efficiency efforts, and also to develop a local knowledge base who is able to manage energy and as well as clean energy flows. So some of how this is done is through investments into building up the infrastructure in Singapore, such as the planned EV installation, charging points within Singapore itself. Thirdly is in raising awareness among 3 key sectors: public, households, and also industry sectors in Singapore, who are seen as heavy users of electricity in Singapore. And lastly is in terms of making investments such as through grants and open challenge calls into research and development efforts to enhance Singapore's capability in energy efficient technology. So if we move on to the next slide. Yep, so the next slide covers some of the key statistics that we are seeing in Singapore in terms of electricity consumption. So if we looked at the chart to the left, we can see that in present, industrial sector and also the commerce and services sector account for the largest usage of electricity consumption in Singapore, which amounts to close to 80% of electricity consumption in Singapore actually. And this is because Singapore is seen as a leading manufacturing hub in the region. And also Singapore itself has a very robust service-based industry. So these two combination leads to a significant usage of electricity consumption in Singapore. And these two sectors forming the backbone in Singapore is expected to carry on using high amounts of electricity consumption in the upcoming years ahead. Besides that, as covered previously in the previous slide as well, we've also mentioned how the Singapore government is looking into more renewable sources of electricity and is looking into basically introducing sustainability into electricity as well. Hence, we foresee that right now it's about 51.4 terawatts per hour of electricity consumption, and we foresee that it will grow eventually to 57.4 terawatts per hour of electricity consumption by the year 2030. So if we move on to the next slide itself, it will also focus on what are some of the renewables that we are seeing in Singapore. So as previously mentioned, Singapore is trying to transit into more cleaner forms of energy in order to build electricity resilience. And right now, in today's present state, we are actually seeing only about 8.8% in terms of electricity generation capacity being renewables. However, with the expected push in Singapore, we do expect to see this amount actually growing more than double into 17% by 2030. As previously mentioned as well, the Singapore government is heavily focused on solar energy in Singapore. So back in 2016, we were only seeing about 125 megawatts peak of solar PV systems capacity in Singapore. To the present day, it has grown about slightly more than 5 times to 670 megawatts peak. And Singapore's government is expected to carry on increasing the capacity of solar PV systems in Singapore. And by 2030, it's expected to grow 3 times of that in Singapore currently into 2 gigawatts peak. So if we move on to the next slide, having identified that electricity consumption is growing in Singapore and how important renewables are in Singapore, we want to take a look at what are some of the trends that we've observed in the Singapore energy efficiency landscape as well. And based off this, we have observed 3 main trends actually. So the first main trend is Singapore's transition to green power sources. And I know it's been repeated frequently, but it also shows how important it is for the Singapore society to basically transition into some of these green power sources. And as mentioned previously, geographical constraints and also growing constraints in Singapore has caused there to be a shift towards more green power sources within Singapore over the past few years. The next is a promotion of energy efficient technologies. And this has been seen in both supply side and also demand side initiatives and policies that the government and also private businesses have basically promoted in Singapore in order to encourage higher adoption of such technologies. So grants, incentives, and even legislations are in place in order to ensure that Singapore is able to transition and inculcate more green technologies and also energy efficiency technologies within the citizenry, be it through smart buildings, greener buildings, and also even, as mentioned earlier on by NEA in the Singapore Green Plan 2030, in various different aspects of the Singapore society as well. Finally, the last trend that we are seeing in Singapore is a transition into clean transportation, as carbon emissions emitted by conventional vehicles these days are seen to be a huge detriment to the environment and the society. So the government has also made key legislation in terms of policies and also significant investments into the EV infrastructure in Singapore, such as the plan to have 60,000 electronic vehicle charging points by 2030 itself. So if we move on to the next slide, I would like to hand the time now to my colleague Nicole, who will be sharing more regarding some of the opportunities that we have identified in the energy efficiency subsector.
Thank you, Clarence. Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Nicole Cham. So we've heard a lot about the energy efficiency drive and how important it is for Singapore and Singapore's Green Plan. The key flux of it is in the Singapore Green Building Master Plan that was launched in 2005. It first started with the new buildings, and subsequently it was extended also to existing buildings, as we understand, which is the largest stock of buildings in Singapore. So the first target is to achieve 80% of buildings to be green, measured by the floor area by 2030. And this is specified by the Green Mark certification. As we can see, there is a $63 million cash incentive for supporting these green efforts for existing buildings. The second target is that 80% of new buildings will be classified as super low energy buildings from 2030, as you've heard of earlier. This is also very important towards supporting building owners and estate owners to drive their activities towards low energy efficiency buildings. And the third target is to achieve a higher emphasis on research and innovation in terms of finding new solutions. And this is supported by a $45 million grant for co-creation and acceleration. And this is done together with industry players like yourselves in order to work towards commercialization. Some example of this, for instance, is an alternative cooling technology that is being sought after also in Singapore. As we know, Singapore is a very, very warm country, and cooling takes up a huge amount of the electricity consumption. In Singapore, we've already seen the initial efforts in Tengah, which is in one part of Singapore where we are having a centralized cooling system instead of a conventional AC system. Can we move to the next slide, please? As you can see, there has been a lot of efforts driven from the government sector in terms of policies, initiatives, and grants. And this is very much taken into the private sector for execution. And this is where we hope that you will see the benefit of working with us and joining the delegation, where we will introduce you to private sector players such as the ones on the right, like SP Group, hospitals, real estate developers, and so on, energy companies that will help you to understand what kind of solutions they are looking for. Can we go to the next slide, please? So, in terms of a built environment, there's a huge demand for solutions that are looking to optimize energy, heat, and lighting. For instance, these are just some, this is a non-exhaustive list, but these are some of the demand or challenge statements that the companies are concretely looking for. For instance, how can we enable a smart building management system that can enable optimal energy usage throughout the day, ensuring that there is minimal disruption to the occupants? This can be used in hotels and hospitals, for instance. And then we have also companies like Capital Land that would be looking for intelligent systems that will help to address real-time optimization in terms of sensors, because currently the experience is that the sensor technologies are not sensitive enough to detect shortfalls, for instance, and anomalies in water levels in water tanks or pipes. So there are many of these companies that are looking for solutions, and some of these are listed here. We also have companies that are looking for solutions in smart grids, solutions in energy storage. And these are companies that we can actually connect you with if you would join us in the Singapore delegations. Can you move to the next slide, please? Okay, the other area that, I mean, just to wrap up, we talked a lot about Singapore trying to achieve the zero carbon emission by 2050 and to reduce carbon emission also by 2030. So these may sound like broad statements, but you've also heard that the carbon tax will increase progressively and quite sharply after 2025 upwards to 2030. So companies, on one hand, are getting grants to help to fund their rollout in terms of retrofitting into more efficient, energy efficient solutions. But at the same time, they are also having the target that the cost of running business will climb rapidly in the next few years if they do not find a way to reduce their carbon emissions in their core business. So these are some of the areas where, for instance, they're looking for what are the ways to be able to collect carbon emission data automatically across multiple sources and be able to share them seamlessly in a very secure way. So these are some of the solutions that we look forward to sharing with you. I hope that you will look into more information if you're an energy efficient solution provider. Now I'll hand the time back to Jackie.
Okay, thank you very much to Business Sweden, Innovation Norway, and the Embassy of Denmark in Singapore for sharing the market insights to the 3 subsectors. Before we move on, just a reminder to our attendees that you can actually post your questions in the Q&A box, and we will address them during the Q&A session after the end of all the presentations. So the next highlight of our webinar is on the Nordic Delegations to Singapore 2023. So this year, we are planning to organize 2 delegations to Singapore. The first one will be in June, focusing on Nordic innovations in circular economy. This includes food and packaging, waste management, and also waste value optimization. And then the next delegation will be happening in October, accelerating Nordic innovations to Singapore and Asian markets. And of course, in addition, we have an event happening in Helsinki, held during the World Circular Economy Forum. So I'll actually have my fellow colleagues, Mark, Irma, and Nicole, to share more about each of these activities coming soon. Mark, please.
Thanks, Jackie. Yeah, I'm back from the Embassy of Denmark in Singapore. Our delegation in June is from the 5th to the 9th of June, and it's in conjunction with Ecosperity Week, which is a big event held by Temasek, an annual sustainability event in Singapore. And the companies that we're looking for are basically companies within food and packaging, waste management, and also waste value optimization. So what Susanna and I spoke about earlier. In this delegation, you'll get a chance to meet with key stakeholders in Singapore and also to connect with potential business partners and customers. In the next slide, I think we have an example of some of the companies that we're working with currently in our program. I promised Jackie to say that this is work in progress. So it's not completely finalized yet, but almost. So of course, we'll have meetings with NEA, who you heard from earlier. We'll have site visits with Semcorp, pitches to CPG. We're going to arrange meetings with the Waste Management and Recycling Association of Singapore. And we also have some site visits, probably to Alba. They recycle e-waste, and some companies who work in packaging and so on in Singapore. So we're quite excited about this. It's a tightly packed program where you get a lot of opportunities to create new business and get more insights into the market opportunities in Singapore. There's different contact information here. I think afterwards we'll circulate the slide. So if you have any questions, please reach out to us. I think that's it for me, Jackie.
Next, we will have Irma to share more about the event in Helsinki and then on the October delegation. Irma, please.
So good afternoon, everybody. My name is Irma Ylikangas and work for Embassy of Finland in Singapore. And I'm very happy to tell that we will have an excellent circular economy event coming in Helsinki. And we as the Nordics, we're going to do part of it on 1st of June. There will be the World Circular Economy Forum, which is one of the oldest circular economy forums globally. We will have key topics in our event on the 1st of June. First, the title is Cities and Circular Economy. So it will tell about how cities can support to do more on the circular economy, and then we are focusing for 4 different areas. We are focusing on construction in circular economy, and also in new solutions and food, textiles and circularity, and new solutions in plastics. The program will be finalized within two weeks, and I'm happy to tell you more about that in future. In addition, we will have their challenges and opportunities in circular economy panel, which will consist about Nordics and Asian participants. This event in Helsinki will have a special focus for the Asian countries, and that's why we have a wide variety of topics in the circular economy, and also there's a possibility for companies to showcase existing scalable solutions for the Asian market. Next slide, please. And then another one, as described earlier with my dear colleague, we have a similar event coming in the October, like what we have here in June. The delegation visit will happen in the late October, and this will be meantime of the Energy Week in Singapore, and also a travel and tourism event in Singapore. Again, we're going to focus different areas like construction and food waste. We heard today that the food waste is the largest waste component in Singapore. And then a lot of focus also on the new sustainable materials like plastic packaging and reusable plastic packaging, and also textiles and then wood-based materials which are used in food packaging. And because we are on the Energy Week, we also will have a lot of dealing with the energy. So we welcome companies to participate for this October event, which have solutions either for circular economy or new materials or energy efficiency or anything linked for energy sector. So please welcome, and I'm happy to share more information in future. Thank you. And Jackie, for you.
Okay, so now we will share more about how you can take part in the delegations. The first and most important part is that you will go through this link where you see the interest form link, or then scan the QR code. There you will see a very, very short form that you fill in so that we get your information, and then the respective Nordic trade promotion officers or embassies will contact you and follow up with you for the next step, and also, provide you with more information if you have any questions. There is a participation fee for each company. We welcome all Nordic companies that are working in these 3 subsectors that we've just described. We welcome small to large companies that are in this circular economy and energy efficiency sectors. If we move on to the next slide. But especially for the small and medium-sized companies, there is a financial support that Nordic Innovation House has discussed and agreed with Nopef or NAFCO that is actually administering this Nopef funding. Nopef fund is actually been running for quite a long period of time. They focus primarily on helping small and medium-sized enterprises who are working in the green and sustainable solutions that come from Nordic countries. So if you move to the next slide. So what are the application details? Maybe most important to know is that a company can apply for both the June and October delegations. And our recommendation is to apply as soon as possible. As just to remind, so the first interest that you need to indicate to us is by 10th of April. And then for June delegation, your Nordic representative will be in touch with you with the application forms further for this Nopef financial support if you're a SME and if you are qualifying for this. If you intend to take part in both June and October, please complete 2 separate forms, one for each. What are the eligible costs and how much are you eligible to claim? So the support is for up to 50% of the total cost of this delegation trip, up to a maximum of 3,000 euros. They can cover things like your flight tickets, your accommodation, salary expense for one participant up to 1,500 euros, or other food and local travel, even the participation fee that I just spoke about earlier, which is the 2,500. So there is a cap of maximum 3,000 euros if you apply. The criteria is quite straightforward. You have to be an SME, which in the EU context is less than 50 million euros in revenue and less than 250 employees. You have been selected and that you qualify for this June delegation trips by your respective Nordic trade promotion office or embassies. You have a commercially proven product or solution. So we are looking for companies that are ready to go to market who have products that are commercially available. So not products that are in prototype phase. And lastly, according to EU support regulation, you should have received below 200,000 euros in the last 3 fiscal years, including this year. Anyhow, please be in touch with us. We will be able to help you more and provide you with the application forms to get this support. Next slide, please. So the timeline again, today is the information webinar. And after this, between now and the 10th of April, please submit your interest, both for the June as well as for the October delegations. We will be reviewing them and approving them as and when we receive them. So please do not wait until the last day. The advantage to this is also that when you get in touch with your representatives earlier, they will give you the forms earlier and you have a chance to discuss, ask more, have more time to ask questions if you have any, and then put in the application for the support for the travel grant from Nopef, because they also will take, a couple of weeks to review and approve your application. Then we have the events happening as we have stated, and we will also be informing, of course, those that qualify and those that have been approved. We will be holding an online session in mid-May and October before the trips to be able to prepare you better for this trips and the program. Next slide. These are the contact persons for each of the Nordic countries. So if you're from Norway, please contact Susanna and so on. So this is a list of the contact points. We will be actually sharing this slide deck, so you will be able to find the information, read through it and understand a bit better. And now we open up the time for questions. I think we've had one question or one hand up for some time. Eric, would you like to give your question over the audio system here? Or, okay, does anyone else have any questions that we can take?
There's one question in the Q&A box, not particularly to the program, but it's more about moving from linear to circular economy. Is there any traceability system implemented to track the items going through the circular economy? This is by Ryan Dye. So is there anyone in our team able to answer this question?
Maybe we need to write it down, Jackie, and then get back to Ryan with an answer after we speak to NEA. What do you think?
Okay, will do. And then I think Nicole was mentioning Eric Wu. I have given you permission to unmute yourself. Not sure if you have a question? Because we've seen your hand up for quite some time actually.
No, it was a mistake. Sorry about it.
Okay, all right. Any other questions regarding today's session or about the delegation?
Ryan, we will come back to you on your question. I'm actually checking with NEA now.
Thank you, Susanna. We have another hand. Oh, okay, my mistake as well. So we don't really have much question today. It seems like our presentation is very clear today. But to remind again, we will share the recording. We will share the slides as well in as early as on Monday, the latest, so that you can have the materials. So I already pasted the interest form link in the chat. So if you're interested in our delegations, do indicate your interest before 10 April. So it's very important. It's a very short time frame, so do not miss out on this opportunity. We believe that the presentation that we gave, there's really a lot of business opportunities over here in Singapore in the subsectors that we have presented today. So if there's no questions, or if you have, again, you can actually contact the persons of each your country representative. I believe they will be able to answer all your queries and provide you with the necessary details to the delegations and events happening. And if you have other questions, just do reach out to us and then on the application and program, etc. So we are more than happy to support on that as well. Okay, I think we are quite